My daddy had been gone for so long, I couldn't remember what his face looked like. He left us when I was just a boy. According to Mama, he wasn't doing much, except for eating our bread and getting drunk anyhow. My grandfather taught me everything that I know, how to ride and look after folks, and handle myself. My sister Ruth had lived with us until the winter of 1912. She had a boy and a young babe. Her babe died that winter. I guess she couldn't handle the combination of the cold and the sadness. So she left her boy for my mama and I to look after. Our lives will never be the same. With all that rain and snow, we didn't know what to do. We lost all our corn, all of our beans, and half of our cattle died out that winter. We thought we were going to die from starvation. There was no avoiding the cold. We'd never seen a year like this in Pacinas. I was only 15, but I had to take charge. For my mother and my grandfather, they could only do so much. Something had to be done. I decided to take matters into my own hands and make the one-day ride from Bear Valley through Pacinas all the way into Hollister. The snow on the ground was fresh and about 4 inches deep. It usually melted off by this time, not this year. I rode early. The sky was clear for once as I set out towards town, down through the Bear Valley and into Pacinas Valley. Atop Pacinas Lake, the snow finally began to melt, and as I got down lower, the hills turned green. When I stopped for water, I saw hundreds of cows near the banks of Bird Creek and the mouth of Cherry Creek. They looked healthy as ever, and the water was plentiful. I felt as if I had stopped for water at the gates of heaven, but I continued to ride. About 3 miles from town, I started to see rows upon rows of trees, and they were all fruitful. I felt joy in my body for the first time in ages, and I hadn't been into town in 3, maybe 4 years. Last time I rode through these parts, there were mere sticks in the ground. The rows now plentiful and bursting with vibrantly blossoming flowers producing glorious fruits and nuts. I had never seen these fruits before. They looked like apples, but didn't taste like it. The fruits were much more flavorful than an apple. And the nuts, they were tasty. They seemed familiar to me. I went to look for the owner of the land so that I could purchase some of their food to bring home for my mama. I couldn't see a home in sight, so I stopped at the general store on my way into town and asked the shopkeeper where I could find the apricots. He told me I could find them down at the Hollister House, which was the local brothel/saloon in town. He said that Mr. Fairhaven would be there. I rode further into town and stopped at the Hollister House. On my way in, I stumbled upon a drunk that was seemingly passed out in a ditch. However, he yelled at me as I walked through the swinging doors.
"What the fuck are you doing coming in here, boy?"
I ignored the drunk as he yelled at me, and I walked through the doors. I quickly announced I was looking for Mr. Fairhaven and that I wanted to purchase some fruit. The barkeep told me he was upstairs and would come down to meet me as soon as he was finished up with his prostitute. I flipped the barkeep a penny and had a sip of brandy while I waited. There was music playing as I walked in the doors, a beautiful piano and a stand-up bass producing sounds that I had never heard before. It sounded like the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard, or so I thought, until that drunk man from outside walked in the doors, stumbling, almost falling down, slurring his words, and he produced a fiddle out of his front pocket. His clothes and skin were as dirty as the dirt that he had been laying in for so long, but the music that he played was like that of God. Everyone in the saloon just sat and watched and listened while they tapped their feet. Nobody could dance because they were enjoying the music so much. I sat there and listened to the drunk man play that fiddle for hours. I even forgot what I had come into the saloon for in the first place. As the fiddle player continued to play, he finally got a little bit tired and had to stop for a glass of whiskey. When he did, I went over to the barkeep and asked about where Mr. Fairhaven was. The barkeep told me that he was probably still working on his prostitute and that it usually took him a while, as to he is getting pretty old. He said I could go talk to his son, and it was to my surprise that he pointed over at the drunken fiddle player. I walked up to the fiddle player and I asked him if he had any prices or any information on the apricots. He didn't take too well to this.
"Now, when I ask you a question, you better fucking answer it, alright?"
said the drunken fiddle player. I paused for a moment as I didn't really know what to expect. But I replied and said, "Okay, go ahead. Ask me whatever you'd like, sir."
Where's your daddy?
This was very strange to me. I didn't know how to answer this because I didn't know where my dad was. So I said I didn't know, and I told him I came to town to get food for my family since I was the only man in the house. The drunken fiddler looked genuine as he laughed at my struggles. He couldn't quite understand how someone's food could freeze and that cows could freeze to death. He seemed to feel bad for me now, and he told me to meet him at the apricot cannery on the south side of town so I could purchase my victuals. As soon as I got to the cannery, I could tell that the drunken fiddler had 3 5-pound sacks of apricots and 2 bags of almonds out for me. When I got off my wagon to greet him, he started cussing at me.
You better not say I never did nothing for you, boy.
I agreed and loaded up the sacks. As I was about to leave, the drunken man murmured something I couldn't understand. "What was that, sir?" I asked him.
Don't forget them hogs, you good-for-nothing piece of rubbish.
The drunken fiddler proceeded to vomit and cuss at me alternately for a couple of minutes before passing out next to the hogs. I got off the wagon one last time, flipped the fiddler a couple of pennies, loaded the hogs up, and rode off. I set up camp that night near the creeks. I rode at dawn and began to notice that the snow was melting a lot higher up into the Bear Valley today than it was yesterday. When I got home, my mama was waiting for me. I don't think I ever seen her face light up so bright. We ate on the hogs and the apricots until late spring. By that time, the fiddler had crossed my mind so many times I couldn't even count. And I had been wondering if he were playing in that saloon, and if he was drunk and vomited on himself, and what he was doing. This may sound crazy, and I don't think he is my daddy, but I sure like to hope, that he is. Not because he's been good to me or nothing like that. Just because I guess I think I'm doing all right.
Well, her black hair brown from the summer sun, green eyes looked around the place. And she told me that she loved me, and I grinned and grabbed her hand and said, I know. Let's get from here now, darling. If we're going, let's go on and go. Well, Lori said her family used to have a little money, and they still act like they do. But your daddy don't think I'm fit to sit in the same room with you. I never ever set foot in Sevier County, well, your brother said it'd break my jaw.